copy and paste styles everywhere. I also am not a fan of how the fashion industry deems things universal, because everyone is shaped differently. We've got different coloring, all of the above. So nothing is universal, and that is beautiful. Hello and welcome back. My name is Milen. I'm a personal stylist here to help you figure out what makes you shine. I'm absolutely excited to get you to a place where you just love your style, love your body, love everything. As I said in previous videos, my channel is dedicated to both male and female styles because I don't think we should just focus on female styles. I think we could also talk about men, their beauty, and also how to make them feel good. So today we're going to talk about probably one of my favorite topics ever, which is the Kibbe body type theory. But essentially it was a theory designed by Mr. David Kibbe, who really put into the idea of art and painting and drawing and into our bodies and how we are all works of art, because we are very much so. And I love that theory, how we're all so individual and it's a mix of lines and shapes and essences essentially in our bodies that create one overall look. Yin being more soft and feminine, and you don't even need to focus on it being feminine, because men can have lots of yin and still be manly, or a man. So those are rounded shapes, luscious shapes, curved shapes, so curves, circles, lusciousness, softness, like, you know, in flesh is also yin. And then on the other side we have yang, which is very opposite side, of course. Obviously they are opposites, but it is sharp, it is angular, it is long, lean, it's strong, it's musculature, it's geometric, it's all of the above of those it's basically, yes, the opposite. So it's more broad or sharp lines, zigzagging, and how those represent or fall on our bodies. And as a result, certain fabrics, certain shapes in clothing mimic, harmonize with those yin and yang balances. And so the theory is that the more you dress in accordance with your particular mix, you look more harmonious, you look intentional. It looks like it was made for you. All of a sudden you're hearing, you look amazing, versus I like that top. See the difference? One is that you look really good, and the other one is that certain object looks good. I'd rather the former. Putting that all together, we kind of categorize with those mixes between 5 main families. The far side of yang, we have dramatics. Dramatics typically are tall, not always, they just appear tall, very narrow, compact. They have, if they have a narrow frame, it has sharp edges, so think very pointy edges to their frame. Their bones are kind of always noticeable even as they gain weight. They kind of have a straight body type, so they're not going to be overly curved. They're not going to have like lots of softness, roundness, fleshiness, and they're not going to have curved lines anywhere. For men, they're going to be incredibly angular, like especially in their face. It's very long, and people will have, like, men and women will have very sharp bone structure in their faces. Men will have very tall, elongated bodies. Think Benedict Cumberbatch is like a perfect dramatic for a male, and like Tilda Swinton maybe for dramatics, but not always. They're not always so androgynous when they're women. It can be someone like Taylor Swift is a dramatic, so she's quite tall, quite narrow, but also, you know, noticeably her bones. She's curvy, and it doesn't mean that women can't be curvy in dramatics. It's just that's not their main focus. When you think of Taylor Swift, you don't go, she's curvy. You go, she's tall, because she's tall. The second family are naturals. So naturals typically are quite yang dominant, but not as extreme as dramatics. They do look quite tall, and they can, and they also have more of the musculature that maybe dramatics don't have, although they can. And they will also have kind of long arms and legs generally, as an overall family of naturals. They also have that natural essence to them. They kind of have some broadness to them, which has that yang, but they do have a little bit of that like slight softness that maybe dramatics don't have. And they're more broad versus sharp. So there's more broadness in their face versus like sharp lines on their face and their body and their bones. Then we have the perfect mix between yang and yin, where it just falls moderately. You can't even tell sometimes whether they're more sharp or soft, and those are classics. And that is a perfect name for it because they truly are classic looking. They don't look overly tall or short. They don't have like extremely long limbs. It's all proportional. It all kind of fits. Even their faces are quite symmetrical, and their bodies are symmetrical. And so overall, just that classic look to them. Think Grace Kelly, who's the classic of the classics. Then we have the Gamines. I like to think of it as you took a bunch of yin and yang, you put it in a blender, and random stuff comes out. And that's what Gamines are. However, they're in a petite form, and they tend to be more compact. They do sometimes look maybe tall in pictures, but of course when you see them in person, no. And there's variations in the Gamines, but generally they're quite petite look. They'll have, softness maybe on their faces or in random areas on their body. Overall, it's just a nice little mix, and they've got lots of the drama and just like a little bit of that yin just splashed in that blender. And the last family, which are the most yin, are romantics. And they really are. They're just luscious, they're soft, they are sensual, they are just all the rounded shapes. Everything is very rounded and just soft edges, nothing sharp, nothing bony, everything is just, it does this flowy, luscious, fleshy yumminess. It's not to be confused with fat, like fatness, fat deposits, because every single body type can gain weight, can gain fat, can lose fat, whatever. It's the overall appearance that it's more, the first thing you notice is the flesh, is the softness. And then within all of those families, we have a soft and a more sharp version. So with dramatics, obviously the more dramatic version is the dramatics themselves, but they have their soft dramatic. That is a larger boned woman or man. They're very tall, super angular, but have this kind of soft on top. And we actually see the softness before we see the sharpness. However, there is still some sharpness underneath that flesh. They can be quite fleshy in their bust and in their hips, so they're very curvy, but they're in a larger sense. They just describe your overall appearance, and they kind of be like Glamazonian. Like, it's quite, think Tyra Banks, right? She's a woman, and she's coming in, and you notice her, and that's what they have, a presence. And they're quite tall, but then they've got this beautiful softness on top of that angular, dramatic side to them. And their facial bones typically are quite prominent and almost have like this exotic, like a luscious exoticness, like Tyra Banks, right? Their eyes are very angular, but then they've got these she's got these very soft lips to them. They're very broad, like angular, like Benedict Cumberbatch, but then they've got just a little bit of softness, maybe in the waist area, a little bit on here, like there's not so much muscle they see, it's almost like a softness on top of the muscles. And then in naturals, we've got the pure naturals, which I've already described, and then you've got the more dramatic naturals with more yang infused. Those are flamboyant naturals. Lots of models sit here because they are just super tall and tend to be quite almost V-shaped. So men and women models typically are like this because it mimics almost like a rack, or like a clothing rack or a hanger in a way. Does not mean that women who are in this category have like no hips. They just tend to be a little straighter in their overall figure. And men are quite V-shaped. They have long hands, or long arms, sorry, and legs, and then have sort of like wider hands and feet, like quite large. And they've got broad, almost like muscular faces. Like, I think Jennifer Aniston's a pure natural, but she's got quite like a muscular, taut face. There's no fleshy parts to their faces. It's quite tight. Cameron Diaz is quite broad, and then they tend to be quite of that muscular look. So you think of those men that are just like, there's like almost no softness on top of it. It's very muscular forward, and they've got that very V, but they're not as sharp and dramatic as dramatics. Then we've got the soft version, which is soft naturals. This is, think J-Lo is a perfect example. They've got what Kibbe describes Kibbe width, and both flamboyant naturals and soft naturals and naturals have this. It just means their chest is a bit more broad in general. Like they may have to go up a size just to accommodate for their broadness here. And men who are just like chest and shoulder very wide in their chest part, with their rib cage like quite broad here all the way to the top, is what soft naturals and naturals, sorry, all have. But the softness is with that yin on top, but they typically will have it on their arms, like that fleshier, softer look, regardless of their weight. It's always present. And they'll have it on their hips and maybe like on their thighs, and they typically will have like a slight hourglass figure, like Jennifer Lopez for women. Just slight, not as intense as like a yin forward, but they have that yin overlap. So their bones and their structure, that angular structure, is not the first thing you notice. It's the softness, and then there's like this kind of muscular width to them. If you think, Jennifer Lopez is kind of the best example because she's quite fit and muscular, but she's always got that soft kind of juiciness on top. Another example could be someone like Brad Pitt is very muscular, like he can hold muscle well, but then on his face is where a lot of that yin element comes in. He's got like a roundedness in his mouth, and then he's kind of got like a rounder head face thing, and then like a slight softness on top, even when he's really muscular. Classics, there's a dramatic classic, which is that yang undercurrent. So they'll be pretty moderate in height, like they won't again look very tall or short because they are classics, and they just appear slightly more muscular than maybe a pure classic, but not overly so. It's almost like you can't identify, but there's just like maybe the angular is in their face is quite angular, or maybe a little bit in their shoulders. Then we have the soft version of classics, which is soft classics, and they will have, again, moderate height because all classics are pretty moderate looking, and so soft classics will kind of sit again in that moderate section, and they just have like slight fleshiness on top of that moderate frame. So they're not very hourglassy, but they're not, and that fleshiness kind of happens everywhere because they're very balanced. It won't like focus in on one specific spot. They're quite delicate looking, but not overly delicate. And by delicate, I mean like there's not, like their bones don't look overly strong, but not super delicate, like you could just snap them in two. And then we've got Gamines. Like I said, they're that blender look. As a reference point, I'm a Flamboyant Gamine. So that is Audrey Hepburn. She's that quintessential Flamboyant Gamine because she almost looks tall, but she's not. And she's quite petite. When you put her next to like Marilyn Monroe, which is a great example, they don't look, there's nothing similar. However, they're both little women, short meaning, and they're kind of petite looking. She's quite narrow in her frame. Yes, she has curves, but that is not her primary characteristic. Flamboyant Gamines have lots of angularity to them, so they've got kind of broader, maybe sometimes sharp shoulders, but narrow, smaller. In the frame is all small and petite, but everything's angular and maybe a little bit of softness in there. So there's maybe a tiny bit of softness, usually in the face, so like rounded lips, big eyes, or rounded eyes, that's where that softness comes through. But overall, very long limbs. For their small stature, I don't know if you can tell. I have super long arms and kind of long legs for my 5'3" frame. And we tend to look muscular even when you don't work out. Like it's kind of that, the reason for it is the skin and the flesh is thinner. So you see that muscle over flesh. Still can gain weight, but you'll always see kind of the bones and the structure first. And then the soft version of Gamines is that soft Gamine. They will have still some angularity because they are in that blender. So that typically will show in their shoulders will be a little bit more angular, maybe like slight angularity in their face, but they, not like Flamboyant Gamines, will have some softness to them. So they will be kind of like fleshier in their faces, just like sits on top of that angular face and always will. They've got some fleshiness just on their arms, usually maybe more bustier than the straight lines that you see in a Flamboyant Gamine. They have like a little bit more of that curve, so they look better with like waist emphasis. And then lastly, in the romantics, I've already described the romantics as the purest romantic, which is the Marilyn Monroe's, Beyonce, right? Really, really soft. For that dramatic version, barely, of romantics are called theatrical romantics. The theatrical romantics are quite short looking. They can be petite, but not always. And they have more delicate bones. So yeah, like you could snap them, maybe. There's not a lot of harshness to any of their features. They have like kind of sloped, rounded shoulders generally, but they've got overall lots of yin, lots of softness, but with a slight yang undercurrent that maybe romantics don't have. And so that can be maybe in their shoulders, maybe slight angularity in their face. And what they have, and how you know you're a theatrical romantic versus a romantic, is they have this double curve. And I will explain this in other videos, so we'll walk right past it. But yeah, they'll have sometimes shorter legs and arms for their size, just very voluptuous. They've got quite a hourglass figure. They've got some fleshiness in their face, but not as intense as maybe a romantic. Orlando Bloom, he does have some rounded features on his face and a little bit, very much so on his body, even as he's muscular. He has like some softness on top, but he has like a sharper jawline somewhat. He's got some sharpness, just like a slight underneath. That's how you know. A female version of a theatrical romantic is just recently typed by Kibbe himself, is Selena Gomez. She's got lots of softness, and as she gains weight, maybe you see more of it, but even when she was thinner, she still has like that soft element. Her face has lots of softness, but she's got somewhat of a sharper frame, not fully that super voluptuous softness like Beyonce has. And that is it. That concludes just a brief introduction. I know I gave a lot here on all the Kibbe body types, but rest assured I will go into more detail. And like I said, I love including both male and female versions in here. I think that'll be really helpful. I myself have already typed all my exes in my head. I didn't tell them personally, but it's good to start thinking, even if you are a female watching this, start thinking of like, yeah, boyfriends, husbands, brothers, fathers, whatever, and start to see those same lines in male bodies as I'm explaining them also in female bodies, and looking at your own lines. If ever you need help figuring out your Kibbe body type, I'm not Kibbe himself, and I get it, but I use his theory with my personal styling services, which you can book me. I do in person. If you're in the Calgary area, I can come directly to you. If you're in the North America area, I do fly to other cities to do group analysis with Kibbe body type, color season analysis as well. And so I can go anywhere in North America for that with big groups. I also offer it online. So if you would rather just send me pictures and I will help you figure out your lines, all links are down below for that. And if you have any questions at all, please leave that in the comments below. I'd love to hear your questions, and I look forward to seeing you again. Bye.